So today we're going to be talking about a framework that we use at Wellstone Action called VAST, Vision, Assessment, Strategy, and Tactics. And today we're only going to be focusing on the first two letters, vision and assessment. The first is to help define our goal, and then the second is to go through a power analysis and targeting process that will inform your strategy and tactics. So again, I'm going to ask for a show of hands. Who here got involved in community change work through a really fun and exciting tactic? Raise your hand and we'll get mics. Anyone ever been to a protest or a rally? Okay. For many, our first entry into organizing and community change work is through tactics. Hey, there's this really exciting speaker who's coming to campus. Will you join me? I want you to learn about this person. And we go, and then they say, let's go storm the steps of the Capitol in the dead of night when no one's there. It's not specific or targeted. But we spend a lot of time actually focusing on tactics in our movement without understanding the pieces that come before and the decisions, the strategic decisions that have come before that actually root us in our vision, have been based in an assessment and understanding of power, so our tactics actually do the thing that we want. So this gets back to that theory of change. So when we talked about if we want this to happen, this must happen for this to happen, right? So with vision, assessment, and strategy, we're going to spend some time actually stepping back from, oh, I just participated in a tactic because it sounded fun, or I think we should do this action against a state legislator, even though they're completely with us, or maybe I want to do a protest, and back up and say, let's actually figure out what our vision is of the world, how do we assess it, and then how do we move power. Strategy and tactics will be covered in session 4, so know that that's coming later. That's not to say that it's not important, but we have dedicated an entire section of time for that as well. So when we start talking about setting a vision statement, we actually have to start with the problem that we're faced with, whether it's homelessness or it's an immigration regime that really separates families and causes folks to be deported based in racism and xenophobia. We have to actually understand the larger problem that we want to change. And if we're not starting there, it makes everything else more difficult. Because when we start thinking about vision, assessment, strategy, and tactics, we have to know what we're dealing with, because all of our other decisions are born from that understanding. So if we want to take on a terrible immigration regime and the separation of families and deportation, we're probably not going to start by saying what needs to change is school board policy. Right? The federal government controls immigration policy, and there needs to be a lot of work that's done at the federal level. But guess what? If we can't move anything at the federal level, this is why we actually start with the assessment, maybe we can do something to protect kids at schools, and we'll go to the school board level. But we have to understand the context and the full view of the problem. That starts to inform a list of potential solutions. One of our bad habits as a progressive movement is to actually just believe there is one solution. And I mentioned that a little bit in the immigration example. Oh, the only thing we can do is comprehensive immigration reform. And so let's put all of our energy into this thing that is not currently passing, and we've done multiple assessments. It's not likely to pass at the federal level, but let's just put all of our energy there. Well, what that might mean then is that we're stuck with only one potential solution, and there are a lot of other things that people can do. For example, state legislatures and municipal bodies have started passing municipal ID programs or driver's license programs, so when law enforcement stops undocumented folks, they don't get separated from their families, they get a speeding ticket, right? That's a workaround, right? If family separation is the problem and a bad immigration system is the key, and something like a big dragnet of law enforcement is one of the challenges, we don't have to just fix federal law. We can make changes at the state or local level as well, right? But if we don't think that there are other solutions, we're just going after one over and over again. I'll give another example. When I was headed into the state legislature, a bill had been run almost 10 years in a row, and it was to set up a state wage theft law. And this is incredibly important. Many low-wage workers have their wages withheld by their employers and never get paid for work that they've completed. We used to call that slavery, economic indentured servitude. You know, it is actually illegal. And if you're an employee and you still out of the cash register, that is called theft. But if your employer takes your paycheck, that's not called theft. It's not punishable with jail time. There's not comparable penalties. And so every single year we ran this one bill that was, let's put criminal penalties on wage theft. So if an employer steals an employee's paycheck, put that person in prison. And it didn't pass. And it didn't pass. And it didn't pass. And then I came in the year that we had a Democratic majority, and it didn't pass. And I was like, we built the power. Our communities were organizing it. It was the right policy. It was the right policy. And in fact, it was the wrong policy. Because what it would have done is put employers in jail. But the workers who had been pushing this forever just wanted to pay their rent. They wanted their money back. They wanted a system of enforcement that made sure that they got paid for the work that they had done. Putting their employer in prison actually didn't do that, right? But we had our minds set on one single policy solution. The next year, when we introduced an administrative enforcement of wage and hour laws that actually investigated and was on the side of workers, that passed. And today, millions of dollars have gotten back into the pockets of workers who earned those wages, right? But because we were focused on one potential solution, we kept losing, and workers lost millions of dollars in the meantime. So part of our challenge is we actually have to think about a bunch of different solutions, and then we have to come back to our assessment and say, does this make sense based on all of the goal criteria we set? Does this make sense? And then we move forward. So when I said vision, you have to clearly define the problem, brainstorm solutions, and then evaluate solutions against goal criteria. But one of the most challenging parts about this is figuring out, is this an issue of relationships? If I'm trying to pass a certain local ordinance on my council, is it just that my council doesn't know anything about this issue and they need education? And maybe I need to build a relationship with them as someone who is a healthcare advocate or someone with a disability who needs access to medical services in our community. Is this just an issue of relationships? And that if I build that relationship, boom, overnight that thing would pass into law or my life would be different. Part of that is we have to figure out, is it about building deeper relationships between communities or within our own community? The other question is this a policy issue? So if the change we're seeking isn't just about deeper, more meaningful relationships that can change hearts and minds, maybe there are structural things that need our attention. Maybe there are specific policies that can improve our lives that we need to move forward. And if we need to change the law, where do we generate policy ideas and at what level do we want to engage in? This is one of the more challenging things because our democracy, the way it works is we can engage at the very local level or at the very national level, and it's about doing an assessment of power and figuring out who has the ability tomorrow to affect the change that we seek. Maybe not tomorrow, but in the general sense, who has the ability to affect the change we seek? And then if we go through that, if we realize it's not an issue of relationships and maybe it is a policy issue that needs to advance, but we can't advance it in the places where we want to, do we need to change the relationships of power? Do we need to actually change who are the deciders and replace those folks? That's also a strategy. This gets back to the interplay of the Wellstone Triangle of electoral politics, community organizing, and public policy. All of these options are available to us all of the time. And it is up to us to assess those very specific dynamics to change the issue landscape, to change the lived realities for people in our community.